Tolkien once said that he disliked Allegory in all its manifestations. He preferred it when stories were inspired by history, real, tangible events that you may feel a personal connection to, not because the author is forcing their political opinions onto you, but because relatable truths are bound to unfold when one looks deep into their history. Dragon Age the Veilguard is a bad video game, and a terrible story. It beats out Starfield as the worst gaming experience I've had on this channel. Some other critics will focus on the flaws in the writing and gameplay without getting into politics. I don't want to do that, and it's not because I think the woke elements of this game are the worst part about it. The game itself is plenty bad without any politics. It's because wokeness is the cause of Dragon Age turning into an incompetent mess. BioWare promoted leftist political activists to write and design their game instead of talented game developers, and so another beloved franchise has gone up in flames, and it will most likely never recover. I bet some of you watching disagreed with me when I said the woke elements aren't the worst part about the game. What could be worse than gutting an established world's lore for a political agenda? And don't worry, I'll complain about that later, but I believe the worst part about the Veilguard can be summed up in one word: choice, or the lack thereof. More than anything, the Veilguard is a game that plays itself. Obviously, this can be seen in the dialogue. With very few exceptions, you cannot be evil in this game. Every dialogue option is either yes, sarcastic yes, angry yes, or I'm trans. I also think the absence of evil options makes doing good feel less impactful. In Baldur's Gate 3, you can feel the weight behind your decisions when you save the day because you know you're stopping an evil event from taking place. Even if you never choose a single evil dialogue option, the presence of evil gives meaning to being good. So the story lacks choice, but don't get too excited and start thinking that the gameplay presents any more interesting choices either. The game's combat plays itself too. The way combat works is you spam low damage combos against health sponge enemies, then you occasionally use high damage attacks when they come off of cooldown. You also have companion skills, however they don't present any interesting choices, as the only correct choice is to use the same companion combo ability every time they come off of cooldown to do the most damage possible. The combat in this game is weird. Although it lacks depth, it does have a dodge roll and many satisfying animations. It shouldn't be worse than Skyrim hit trading combat, and yet I've never once felt the need to lower Skyrim or any game I've played into easy mode. However, I switched to storyteller mode after 8 hours of playing Dragon Age. To my surprise, I still thought the enemies had a bit too much health in game journalist mode, which highlights my main issue with the combat. The combat shouldn't be absolutely terrible, but when all you do is fight reskinned health sponges for hours on end, it becomes miserable. I genuinely don't know if I saw any new enemies past the 6-hour mark outside of a few bosses. A game like Skyrim doesn't have amazing enemy variety either, but at least the combat is spread out across the open world, so it feels special when you find an encounter. The Veilguard has many Devil May Cry 5 type levels, where all you do is run through a linear level that's broken up by constant combat. This works in a game with incredible combat depth like DMC, but it's dreadfully boring in a game that plays itself like the Veilguard. If the Veilguard had larger open world areas with good side quests like The Witcher 3 or Baldur's Gate 3, the combat wouldn't ruin the experience. But for so much of Dragon Age, the combat is the entire experience, and it's not good. Also, lowering the game into storyteller mode removes the only interesting choice combat presents, which is when to use the dodge roll button, because it hardly matters when nothing hurts me. However, I found this trade-off to be more than worth it so that I could spend less time killing the same health sponge enemies on repeat. This game would be drastically improved if there was a difficulty option that kept enemy damage high while lowering enemy health a lot. Of course, even if they did do this, the reskins would still get boring, but the game would overall be better. In addition to the combat lacking interesting choices, the level design is also terrible. Not only do the levels lack any interesting navigational choices due to their linearity, they also have some of the most brain-dead puzzles I've ever had the displeasure of solving in a video game. Many puzzles are as simple as dragging one object from point A to point B, or shooting blight sacks to open a door. Every time I had to shoot crystals to open a door, my game would glitch out like it was a Bethesda title. You are also also stopped in many levels with companion ability puzzles, where you tell your companion to use their ability, then you get to continue. That's it. That's the puzzle. You just press the button. To give this game one compliment, I enjoyed how pretty the levels looked. Many of the city levels in particular looked like fantastical places I'd want to visit myself. However, my compliments end there, as the cities themselves are artificial. One second you'll be running through a city, the next you'll be fighting cultists or darkspawn right next to the townsfolk. It felt so weird to finish a dungeon and have it lead directly into the city. So the people of this world are content with having darkspawn living on the other side of the wall right next to them. In something like Baldur's Gate 3, you only get into combat in the city when it makes sense. You'll be attacked by criminals, or you'll find a cult hideout deep underneath the sewers. The cities are also not fun to explore. Most NPCs have no dialogue at all, and the side quests you do find are extremely uninteresting, as they never offer interesting RPG choices. In The Witcher 3, a random side quest can leave you with a deep moral quandary, while in the Veilguard you'll be asked to figure out why a ghost died, then you'll follow map markers and fight darkspawn until you can help the ghost, and then the ghost leaves. So many of the non-companion side quests are just AAA bloat designed to increase the playtime so they can say they made an incredible 80-hour RPG, even though most of it is repetitive and thoughtless. More than anything, this game's level design is about not thinking and following map markers. You follow map markers from point A to point B so that you can fight the same reskinned health sponges with the same strong abilities so you can complete the quest and get the only good ending that the developers allow you to have. There are no meaningful choices in most of the story, or the combat, or the level design. I know this will sound overly hyperbolic, but to me playing Dragon Age felt like I was trapped in a prison. Just like a prison, there are no interesting choices to be made in the game. You do as you're told. The game tells you to be a good guy, it tells you to go from point A to point B, and it tells you to use the same strong combo abilities to kill the same enemies over and over again. A robot script could play through Dragon Age and the gameplay would look identical to mine. The game design feels like it was generated by ChatGPT, and even that is an insult to AI because I think AI could make a game feel less robotic than this. I didn't like Starfield, but I was content to play that game for 80 hours in very hard mode for my critique. It took me 30 hours to beat Veilguard, and you couldn't pay me enough money to go back and 100% the game. To clarify, I do think my disdain for this game is heavily subjective. If you aren't bothered by the politics or health spongy enemies or simple puzzles, I could totally understand why you might give this game a 6 out of 10 or higher. If you prefer this to Starfield, I can understand that too. Now, if you gave it a 9, I might raise an eyebrow, but personally, this game is everything that I can't stand about modern gaming in one package. It's a 30 to 80 hour movie where you watch a game play itself, and the movie is bad. On the topic of the movie being bad, let's talk about the story, which means it's time to talk about this game's favorite subject, gender. I believe that all great stories are made from a balance between the masculine and the feminine. Some authors will lean more towards one gender or the other, but you can never go too far. A masculine story that is all plot points and action divorced from any feeling will lack impact, just as a feminine story that is all people talking about their emotions divorced from grounded plot events will feel frivolous. It is the job of the author to take the strengths associated with each gender and combine them to create something truly great. Dragon Age the Veilguard is not bad because it's too feminine. It's bad because it takes the worst aspects of masculine and feminine writing to create a narrative so dull that it almost requires a new name. Perhaps non-binary writing. Much of the dialogue is characters explaining complex plot points divorced from any emotion, and then when the characters start expressing themselves, it's always one of two things. It's either a cringy joke that nobody is laughing at, or self-doubt. The best analogy to this game's character writing is that it feels like you're talking to a girl who just broke up with their boyfriend and is unloading all of their insecurity and self-doubt onto you. If I ever have to listen to another Dragon Age character tell me how insecure and nervous they are and how they don't think they can do it, I'm gonna explode. Then all of your dialogue options are ripped straight from r/nice guys. Where's the dialogue option to tell them to shut the up and stop complaining. This is a game where all you do is constantly murder other humans and demonic creatures. How in the hell do none of these characters have any backbone to just be a little masculine and stop complaining when all they do is murder people? When the writing is leaning into its masculine elements, it's usually just generic villains prattling on about world domination, and when it's feminine, it's constant complaining. And when the characters aren't constantly complaining about how bad they feel, they're forcing their modern-day political beliefs onto me. One character, Taash, decides to transition from being a woman to being a non-binary they-them. This is a medieval fantasy world. You can't just warp an entire genre and franchise to suit your political beliefs when it makes no sense at all. It may come as a surprise to these writers who think that mansplaining or misgendering someone is the biggest evil one can commit, but when humans have to actually fight to survive, all of the gender stuff becomes a whole lot less important. In one scene, Taash comes out to their mom as non-binary. Tash's mom is rightfully confused as she has never heard of such a concept. It's almost like Taash spent too much time on TikTok, and after getting some ideas in her head, she brought them to her mother. I also don't know how concepts like being non-binary were developed in the lore of Dragon Age between Inquisition and the Veilguard, because the writers don't care to explain. They even decided to include a misgendering scene, where the female characters discuss the best way to apologize to someone for this terrible transgression, and they explain how saying sorry itself isn't enough and you have to do more than that. The politics of this game extend far beyond just the writing, as the character designs seem to have a hidden agenda as well. As we all know, every character was made to look like a DreamWorks cartoon character with inflated bobbleheads. As if that wasn't bad enough, the writers made sure to make every male character fairly handsome, or at least as normal as a bobblehead can look, but they decided to make all of the women either look a bit off or outright ugly. When I first saw Harding, I thought she had blood all over her face from battle, but no, they just increased the amount of freckles on her face by a ton. They took Morrigan, an attractive character from a past title, and made her look a bit worse. Not ugly, just not as pretty as before. I also wouldn't say that Balara is outright ugly, however she doesn't have as attractive of a face shape as her brother. This is not a coincidence. It would be one thing to have unattractive characters, but to have only unattractive women is almost like an intentional political message. Unattractive women are great, but unattractive men should not exist. And hey, this is one of the only parts of Veilguard's story that is grounded in reality, since nearly 2/3 of young American men are single in comparison to only 1/3 of young women. Our real world has become a bit of a dystopian nightmare for many, but let's just ignore all of that so we can talk about the importance of gender identity in a fantasy world. When so much of the story is the writer's politics, it's hard not to see every element of the story as a political allegory. Why is the first Warden such a stupid villain? Well, he clearly represents the evil Patriarchy, and the Patriarchy is an evil institution run by stupid white men. So he's a stupid white man who tries to stop your group of ethnically diverse elves from winning. So much of this story feels like a made-up Reddit post about social justice that ends with, and then everyone stood up and clapped. It's absolutely dreadful. Also, why does Varric get hurt and sit out the entire adventure? There is an okay plot justification for this, but a part of me thinks they chose Varric to get hurt so that they could get rid of another white guy. Many people have said that the Veilguard is bad because it feels less like Dragon Age and more like Disney, and while I understand where that sentiment is coming from, I don't think you're giving Disney enough credit. Many Disney films are modern retellings of classic stories that have existed for millennia. In other words, they're based in history, not always political allegory. This can make them feel a bit generic, but it also makes them feel timeless. Then you add in some great animation and music, and Disney films can be quite good. The Veilguard is not that at all. Its modern political jargon does not at all compare to Hercules or The Lion King. One of the only things the writers get from Disney is the overly simplistic black and white morality of the heroes and villains. This is especially troubling, since the game's predecessor, the Inquisition, beautifully set up this game to be morally gray. They introduce you to a companion named Solas, who is later revealed to be an elven god who is also known as the Dread Wolf. The world of Dragon Age is called the Veil, and it was created by two other elven gods. In order for the Veil to be created, the old world was destroyed, and Solas wants to restore the old world that he loves so much, even if it results in the destruction of this world. At the end of Inquisition, Solas becomes the main villain, which could have been a great setup for a dark, morally gray story where you dive deeper into the mind of Solas. So guess what the writers of Veilguard do? They have you instantly defeat Solas in the first mission, and then they make two other elven gods the main villains. These villains' motivation for being evil is that they like blight and want to spread it everywhere, so everything looks like a bunch of black tentacle monsters, I guess. It's like these writers were supposed to make a sequel to something like The Witcher 3, but then they made Kingdom Hearts villains instead. So now we play as our ethnically diverse cast of elves and dwarves on a journey to stop the darkness. Before you are able to defeat Solas in the first mission, Varric tries to talk to him. Solas stabs Varric with his god-killing dagger called the Wolf's Fang, and the damage from it is so severe that it takes him out of your party for the rest of the story. Then you defeat Solas and seal him away inside of a dream prison called the Fade, where he will remain until the final act of the game. Stopping Solas from destroying the Veil caused two evil elven gods who created the Veil to be released, and now you need the help of the Darkspawn slaying faction, the Wardens, to kill the gods. Unfortunately, the leader of the Wardens, who I will refer to as the Patriarchy, doesn't like this. Since you saving the world from Solas caused the gods to be released, he views everything as your fault, and he will help you with nothing, and refuse your help. This conflict comes to a head when a dragon and an army of Darkspawn attack the Wardens. You go to help, but the Patriarchy refuses you once more. Then I decided to punch the Patriarchy in the face, and everyone clapped. The end. Also, I just want to point out that Mr. Patriarchy is supposed to be the leader of a very strong faction in a fantasy RPG, yet you are able to knock him out in one hit without a boss fight. This is clearly idiotic, but I guess the liberal writers wanted to show us just how pathetic the Patriarchy really is, so they let us knock out what should be one of the strongest warriors in the game in one hit. We successfully defeat the dragon, but oh no, the Patriarchy wakes back up and says that only he is deserving of delivering the final blow to the dragon you just defeated. Wow, the white male Patriarchy sure is evil. But before he can kill it, the elven goddess Gillenane wakes up from within the dragon's head and murders the Patriarchy, and everyone claps again. Now it's all up to the ethnically diverse elves to save the day because the Patriarchy failed. The assassin character Lucanus tries to deliver the killing blow with Solas's god-slaying dagger, but he misses. This causes Gillenane to use her special attack where she explodes the entire arena with her blighted body. I have no idea why she didn't use this as her first attack, or why she never uses the do damage everywhere attack again after this, but I guess you aren't supposed to use your brain when you're playing this game. We narrowly escape the do damage everywhere attack and return to our home base. Later on, we fight Gillenane again, where she attacks us with two dragons this time, and since she refuses to blow up the arena, we defeat her by shooting her with a ballista bolt. She is saved by the other evil elven god Elgernon. In one mission, we infiltrate Elgernon's cult to save some prisoners. We do this without any masks on, so we should be easily identifiable. However, none of the cultists notice their greatest enemy's face. We approach Elgernon and almost succumb to his mind control spell. Then our party members are able to break free of the spell in front of him without getting noticed by anyone. But that's not really true. He actually does notice you and sends cultists to kill you after this scene. He just conveniently doesn't notice you while you're actively using magic in a packed crowd of cultists in front of him, where he has a perfect opportunity to kill the entire party. story. Yeah, so I don't think the plot makes any damn sense at all. It's so bad that I don't think I need to point out the problems. Just explaining the events themselves makes it sound so stupid that I couldn't make it look good if I tried. There was one highlight to the story after you save the cult's prisoners. The whole game we hear rumors of a man named the Butcher, a fearsome presence whose shadow hangs over the people of Treviso. We head out to meet one of his contacts, only for it to be the Butcher himself. We talk to the Butcher in a tense scene where he explains how he is both drawn to the power of the elven gods, as well as to the city that he loves. You can feel the tension in the air as this unstable man wrestles with his desire for power in his mind. The scene reaches its peak when he flips over the table and challenges you to a duel. For the first time in the entire game's story, I was engaged. There's finally a cool, dark, masculine villain that I want to defeat. And then you beat him in one quick boss and he's out of the game forever. And the real villain of Treviso is revealed to be the wimpy governor. This is the first second of genuine interest I had for this game's writing, and they instantly crush it. Instantly. These writers couldn't bear to witness a dark masculine villain stay on screen for longer than one scene. We can't show the evil patriarchy too much, we can't make it look too cool. We need to focus on companions constantly complaining about their self-doubt, or Balara writing fanfiction about the main character. And yeah, that last thing is a real scene in the game. Alright, with all of the nonsense out of the way, let's talk about the ending missions. And it might surprise you to know that I thought the ending was okay, at least by this game's standards. There are still some major disappointments in store for us, but I was entertained enough during the ending sequence that I didn't want to actively turn the game off like how I felt during the rest of the game. The first thing to note is how different the tone of the game becomes here. The made-for-Disney Channel BS goes away, and things finally get brutal. On your way to killing Gillenane, you can choose 2 companions for 2 jobs. I chose Harding to be the lead for the other team, and I chose Nev to help with a magical problem. To my surprise, these choices are some of the only ones in the game that actually matter. Choosing Nev here gets her kidnapped by the Blight, and I'll explain in a moment how Harding's choice becomes meaningful. We head on to fight Gillenane one last time. Oddly enough, the final fight against Gillenane is the worst one. She doesn't even have any boss moves. You just fight reskinned enemies while you destroy Blight Sacks, which is a boring, repetitive activity you've been doing throughout the entire game, and they decided to also make it a boss battle. She also refuses to use her blow up the entire arena attack, so we are able to destroy all of the Blight Sacks. After this, Lucanus tries to attack Gillenane with the God-slaying dagger, but he is caught by her tentacles. Harding saves Lucanus by shooting Gillenane repeatedly while Gillenane impales her. The damage from the arrows allows Lucanus to break free and finally land the killing blow on Gillenane. I was genuinely shocked when this happened. I did not expect them to actually kill off a character with all of the cartoony dialogue that led up to this. The fact that it was my choice that led to Harding's death made it feel a bit more impactful, although I don't really care about any of the characters, so I didn't care too much when she died. But still, it was cool to have a few meaningful choices at the end of the game. The game would be much better if the rest of it had things like this. With Gillenane dead, the veil weakens, which causes us to be transported into the Fade prison dream where Solas is. The main character, Rook, reaches out to hang on to a shape-shifting statue of his companion, while Solas reaches out to take back his god-slaying dagger, the Wolf's Fang. I thought it was pretty obvious that this was all fake, but Rook decides to prioritize the statue over the incredibly important Wolf's Fang dagger, which causes Rook to fall deeper into the Fade, while Solas is able to tear open a portal out with the dagger. Now, in the Fade, you finally learn the big plot twist of the game. Varric wasn't injured from the wound Solas gave him. He actually died in the beginning of the game when Solas stabbed him. Solas has been projecting a vision of Varric from the Fade into your mind when he was never really there. Now we get to talk to the real Varric, who is a ghost, as he leads us to the Fade's exit. The plot twist about Varric was interesting, but as I stated before, a part of me feels like Varric was chosen to leave the entire game and die because he was too white. With these writers, I wouldn't put it past them. I'm also deeply confused as to how you escape the Fade here. We don't have the Wolf's Fang to open a portal, yet one opens up anyways. Maybe anyone could have opened a portal to save Solas at any time and it just didn't happen because no one likes him? I don't really know. Either way, we get out of the prison easily and focus on our final mission. I actually liked this part of the story. You get to plan which companions will lead different parts of the battle force during the final attack on Elgernain's army. If you've completed a companion's questline, they will be more likely to succeed, which is a nice way of making it feel like all of the boredom leading up to this point wasn't for nothing. I also find it funny that I enjoyed watching the long final battle cutscene more than I enjoyed playing through the final level, fighting all of the reskinned enemies. If the game's simplistic combat is going to play itself, it might as well go all of the way and just be a movie at that point. We meet up with Solas in this level, and he remarks on how incredible it is that you managed to escape the Fade, and I'm just as baffled as he is as to how I escaped the Fade since it wasn't really explained. Solas says that he is struggling to kill Elgernon's archdemon dragon, let alone Elgernon himself, so he gives you back the Wolf's Fang dagger and entrusts you to kill the god instead. The only issue is that Elgernon's soul is tied to the veil and is the only thing keeping it from collapsing. We need to tie the soul of another elven god to the veil to keep it alive, so we plan to give Solas a fake dagger after we defeat Elgernon in the hopes that he will use the fake dagger to try to destroy the veil, which will cause him to be stunned since only the real dagger can destroy the world, and then we will use the real dagger to bind him to the veil while he is stunned. Also, on the way to Elgernon, we find and free Nev, who was imprisoned by the tentacle monsters earlier. A weird feeling hit me on the way to the final boss. Solas transforms into his strongest form as the Dread Wolf, and we get to witness his epic fight against the Archdemon, which was really cool to see, only for the actual gameplay to be more of the same boring combat against reskinned enemies. I wish that we could have traded places, and I could be playing as the Dread Wolf having fun, instead of doing more repetitive combat. After battling our way through the last horde of reskinned enemies, we finally reach Elgernon. He traps Solas in a bunch of tentacles and boasts about how no one can defeat him, but what he doesn't know is that I've been playing on storyteller mode this whole time, so he doesn't stand a chance. Despite this, he almost kills us in a cutscene, only for Nev to save the day by running onto Elgernon's throne and binding with the tentacles. This causes Nev to free Solas, but she dies in the process. With Solas's help, we were finally able to kill Elgernon. Now, after an entire game of Solas not being the main villain, he approaches us for the Wolf's Fang dagger so that he can put an end to the veil and recreate his old world. We have the choice to either trick him with the dagger or fight, and you already know what I chose. I got up and I fought the god. To my great disappointment, you do not get to have a boss fight with Solas, in a game where Solas was originally supposed to be the main villain. All we get to see is a few set pieces of his Dread Wolf form fight something else, and we don't even get one boss battle against the Dread Wolf in a game that was originally supposed to be titled Dread Wolf. No wonder they changed it. They didn't even finish the ending. They don't even have a boss against the Dread Wolf. I guess they had to change it to the Veilguard. Instead, we defeat him in a cutscene and seal Solas away. Everyone lives happily ever after, the end. Or you can choose to trick him and you get a slightly different cutscene before you seal him away and everything ends the same way. Also, they don't have any real epilogue with the companions or anything. Instead, you save the day, watch a short epilogue slideshow, then the game ends. I could not imagine how disappointed I'd be if I sunk 80 hours into this game before I got to this abrupt ending with no Dread Wolf fight or real epilogue. So if you couldn't tell by now, I really didn't like this game. It very much feels like a game made for no one. If you're a longtime Dragon Age fan, you'll be upset by the poor writing and forced politics. And if you're a part of the new modern audience that this game was designed around, you'll be confused by all of the fantasy lingo that will be going over your head. I'm honestly surprised that this game didn't get mixed reviews on Steam at launch, and hey, if you disagree with this video, that's fine. I am not trying to force my beliefs onto other people like how these writers were trying to force their political beliefs onto me. Believe what you want to believe. If you felt like this critique was too negatively biased, you're right. I am incredibly biased against this game. It is a representation of everything that I hate about modern American culture and politics in one product. And if you think that I dislike this game too much, you're probably right. But I also have to say that this game is the opposite of everything that I stand for as a human being. It felt like every second other than the ending was me trapped in a woke prison, or talking to HR at work. From a place of pure emotions, I'd give this game a 2 or 3 out of 10. If that seems too low to you, then maybe it is. But again, I am emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually against this product. If you don't feel that way, then your score will reasonably be different. Typically, when I make videos, I have more thoughts that I leave out of the critique, but despite wanting this video to be long, I have run out of things to say. To put it another way, there is so little depth to every facet of this game that there's nothing to talk about. You fight the same few health sponge enemies on repeat so that you can follow map markers in linear levels with brain-dead puzzles that lead to annoying conversations with companions, so you can continue a morally simplistic plot that lacks important choices until the final few hours of the game. There isn't much for me to analyze in this game, because there isn't much game to begin with. Stretching out repetitive content by making me fight the same enemies over and over again, broken apart by the same simplistic puzzles, doesn't provide anything that I can analyze. I'll end the video with this. Tolkien once said that evil is not able to create anything new. It can only distort and destroy what has been invented or made by the forces of good. How many more beloved franchises need to be mutilated and destroyed until we finally say that enough is enough? Leave your forced politics out of my games, and let games be made by people who actually love games again. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing or supporting me on Patreon. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.